Grasslands. When we think of video game settings, prairies and grasslands are perhaps the most common biome out there, being the default one for many franchises. Think of the very first video game you ever played. Was it Super Mario for the NES? Was it The Witcher for the PlayStation 4? Was it Terraria or Minecraft for the PC? Most likely than not, your gaming journey started in a pixelated grass field. Ever wonder why grasslands are the default settings in most games? One could imagine prairies to be uninspired in comparison to more exotic biomes such as jungles, oceans and deserts, but perhaps the perceived banality comes from the abundance rather than from the characteristics grasslands have in the gaming world. There is some sort of comforting feeling of having the first level of a video game set in a vast green area rather than a more exotic location. Peach's castle in Super Mario 64 is a much more welcoming hug than a hot volcano, an underground mine or a cold tundra. These biomes definitely need to be praised in dedicated videos down the line, but when it comes to Kickstarter adventure, nothing is more used by developers than a trusted green field. The aesthetics a green field has can be molded and be utilized for any kind of game in any kind of setting, whether it's a world to explore, a battlefield, or home to ruins of a lost civilization. The modularity of Grasslands is incredible, and it is even more incredible to observe and study how this biome was incorporated into various scenarios by developers from all around the world. Perhaps it is time to stop falling into the common misconception of considering Grasslands a banal choice of setting. Perhaps it is time to praise the biome's popularity over criticizing its constant appearance in gaming. In today's video, just like we did for deserts, I wish to discuss the role grasslands and prairies have in video games from an artistic and a gameplay point of view. As before, the video will be filled with relevant examples to have a more complete picture on how grasslands are depicted in gaming and why developers adore having them in the beginning of their crafts. Without further ado, let us begin. Grasslands are a tranquil biome, with little hazards to face by the enemies that roam the land. There is something serene when riding your horse across the infinite fields, something reassuring when setting up base in an open field, something magical when counting the flowers that paint the green canvas that is the world surrounding you. In a game like Valkyria Chronicles 4, fighting the Imperials across the continent's flowered fields decreases the tension the player feels, and makes it so that the first level of the games feels like training rather than warfare. It is only when the game introduces harsher climates such as the snowy peaks and the frozen seas that the game's tone evolves, increasing the sense of harshness the war has over the protagonists. A similar serenity can be found when playing Just Cause 3. The game's Mediterranean setting makes it so that fighting enemies is merely an inconvenience, a distraction, since your mind is busy gazing at the sunflower and red Popeyes scattered around the Isles of Medici. Out of the 4 titles of the franchise, the third entry is the most picturesque. Every biome will have its beauty, its charm, its elegance in the great puzzle that is Earth, yet very few will have a persistent positive vibe that Grasslands do. There is inherent tranquility in a prairie where time stops and the mind reflects, no matter how it is painted below the sky. Painted is the right word, since grasslands in video games are not always alike. Yes, most are painted green, but roaming around Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Ghost of Tsushima and No Man's Sky, you can observe and enjoy the millions of colors the single blades of grass reflect, and paint the never-ending sceneries. And speaking of paintings, grass is a curious element that can paint life where life is absent. Think of titles such as Nier Automata. In a world devastated by war and terror, fear and destruction, grass is the sole element that seems to survive and prosper over the ruins of a distant past. The grassy fields born over the soil of parks and town squares donates a ton of hope and rebirth to the world of Nier. The Pikmin franchise takes this route too. Not only is grass covering the lost past of planet Earth, but grass aliens, the Pikmin, are the docile creatures that make these lost worlds theirs. Grass is alive, quite literally, and controlled by the player to achieve survival in this harsh but beautiful world. Another title that has a similar tone to this regard is the Talos Principle. The puzzle game, similar in some regards to Portal, is set in a world abandoned by time, with ruins both from the ancient time and from the future, all covered by vegetation and grass. Yet again we see the unique effect overgrown grass has on the environment. There's something intriguing about nature reconquering an abandoned place, as if the world has been given a new beginning, a reset, a second chance. But grasslands are not just pretty to observe. Their implementation in an open world game can have a specific game design related reason. As soon as the player is capable of leaving the Great Plateau in Zelda Breath of the Wild, the first area the player is tempted to explore is its vast Hyrule Field that is in front of the old church. The reason why is because shrines and towers are easier to spot, meaning that the player is more confident exploring those areas first, where he or she is able to boost up some hearts and stamina before diving into further away areas of the map. Flat terrain does not hide surprises, therefore it does not have an impeded exploration. Grass terrains are also handy to explore on horseback, being the land widely accessible to navigate in any direction. In a game like Dragon Quest XI, grasslands are the best places to ride, since everything is visible and above all reachable by the player. Riding across forests, mountains and canyons makes for a much more challenging time. Navigating grassy routes in Pokémon games is also comparably easier than routing across other parts of the regions. The tall grass is home to wild Pokémons ready to be caught, and trainers are in plain sight. Not to mention you can fly away whenever your team is weakened. All this to say that grasslands give players less obstacles and makes exploration much smoother. There is functionality when spawning for the first time in a field rather than a more tedious biome to navigate. In games like Minecraft and Terraria, the player's best spawning points are in green biomes such as grasslands and forests. The latter is useful for gathering resources, while the former is best to build up a player's first base. Not to mention that both Minecraft and Terraria's first iterations had only grasslands and woods. Only with later updates more biomes were introduced and properly implemented in the game. Despite the play on words, sandboxes prefer grass over sand. Think of literal sandbox games like Garry's Mod. Placing a green floor for the player to walk around comes second nature to developers. This habit is not only present in sandboxes, but of course also in level-based games, where different levels have different themes, and the first one just so happens to be quite often grasslands. Sonic the Hedgehog's Green Hill Zone is iconic for being the first level of many Sonic games, from the 2D to the 3D to the open world. The Green Plains work sublimely as an introduction place for the player to learn and experiment with Sonic's unique gameplay, and it is one of the most iconic levels in video games. Mario games also often feature a grassy looking 1-1, later diversifying its geography in later levels. In fact, Mario started doing this 3 years before Sonic, in Super Mario 3 for the NES, and from there most subsequent games, especially in the new Super Mario Bros. Series. If I were to list all franchises that have grass fields as their starting level, we would stay here for hours. Perhaps it is even quicker to list games where grasslands are absent rather than the opposite. You might be tempted to think that grasslands are simply easier to depict than other locations, yet gaming has evolved drastically in the past 30 years, meaning that we would be expecting this trend to fall rather than to stay constant. Perhaps there's simply something natural to consider prairies as starting points for us humans. The reason why we might associate prairies with the beginning of a game may be a reflection of our human development. When you reflect upon it, big civilizations of the past relied on fertile lands to prosper. Lands were more useful than minerals and other resources. From China to India to Mesopotamia to North America, grassland was essential to kickstart the developments of humans. A reflection of this fear of mine can be observed in the Sid Meier's Civilization franchise. In all titles of the games, a crucial resource to obtain in the early game is food, and the most efficient way to obtain it is to build farms over grasslands, meaning that the prosperous nations will find its ground in fertile lands, making it synonymous with beginning of life, of nation building. In other strategy games, grasslands convey a message of fairness, of an even playing field when facing an opponent. Games like Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp are set entirely in grass-dominated maps, with the occasional mountain range and bodies of waters. This might feel peculiar since the game clearly has biome-based characters such as Olaf and Drake. However, since commanders already have power-ups, the game prefers to have unequal conditions in the field, to make the game's starting points fair and balanced, making grasslands the default setting of the game. Wargroove on the other hand does have the snow and desert theme. However, gameplay-wise, they function exactly the same as grasslands, making these extra scenarios aesthetically but not functionally different. Again, grassland is perceived to be the default, while the others are fancy additions. But do not be fooled, the flatness of a prairie field is a double-edged sword. Yes, grasslands give a sense of safety and work fine as first levels, but the flatness and vast openness of a grass field could be an exposable vulnerability. In total war games, placing your troops in a grassy field next to hills and forests is a suicide mission. The smallest of advantages your enemies can obtain by exploiting your troops' lack of natural protections can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Food resources will not be a problem when building your Roman Empire or Japanese shogunate, but as easily is to expand, as easily is for others to expand towards you. In a game like War of Rights, set during the American Civil War, being exposed in open fields makes the regiment a perfect target practice for the enemy artillery. Grassland in this case is much more dangerous than forest or an urban environment, where finding safety is much more feasible. Danger does not only come from human activity, but from animal one too. It is in the Great Prairies where we found animals like bisons and tigers ready to attack you, to be a prey among predators. In this regard, games like Far Cry Primal really take advantage of the grassland scenario to make the experience more immersive, more attached to nature. And speaking of dangerous nature, I do wish to remind you that prairies can host a variety of natural disasters, such as the infamous tornado. Just cause 4 Solis is infested by these calamities, all located entirely in the softer, greener part of the island. Tangling with a tornado is a dance you might not survive, but what is certain is that you will have quite a frenetic ride. But apart from natural disasters and wild encounters, grasslands are often home to powerful kingdoms in perpetual conflict. In the world of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, the lands of Velen are contested between Redania, Temeria, Nilfgaard and the city-state of Novigrad herself. All the 4 powers fight over precious land, making it a field of war, not to mention filled with monsters and creatures for Witchers to defeat. Grasslands can be dangerous, but they can also be synonym for freedom. In a game like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the game's prologue takes place in extremely small areas to teach the players the basic, but after the prologue, the first time the player is given the freedom to move anywhere where they desire is in the grass fields of Gormott. Once the player sees the infinite grassland covering the Titan, they understand they are given the freedom to roam the lands however they more see fit. At this point of the discussion, you may have noticed that I've used many examples of what grasslands can be. At times starting points, at times sandboxes, at times arenas filled with danger and much more. And perhaps making this statement explicit brings home the point from which I've started the video. Grasslands can be anything and everything, the absence and the absolute. No other biome we will find in gaming will grant so much freedom to developers than grasslands. Yes, other biomes might have more than one face to it, more than one use, but none grants so much freedom than a green field across the screen. Using a more exotic biome might already give a video game an undesired tone. A jungle might make people think of an Indiana Jones-style adventure, a desert a hard trip for survival, a sea an always changing lifestyle. Grasslands do not make a strong statement, they can be used for quite literally anything without masking or disrupting the main focus of the game. The abundance of grasslands in video games is unbelievable, at first associated with perhaps a lack of creativity due to how often it is used, but it is clear now how variegated it can be and how much freedom it gives to both the developers and you, the player. Grasslands will forever be synonym with the beginning of video games, but for good reasons. Prairies and flower fields give the game a sense of tranquility, where the player is not punished for learning the game's mechanics. Furthermore, there is great variation to be had in grasslands than one might initially think, making them a viable biome to use for any convenience. It is fascinating to observe all the different ways this biome is used throughout video game history, from the very first level of Super Mario all the way to the new Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I hope you do not get bored of running across green hills or flying above Los Santos. After this video, I truly hope you acquired a fascination for this green scenery. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many grasslands times for watching today's video. Last time we explored deserts and I saw many suggestions of what biome I should do next, from the more common ones like jungles and tundra to more unique ones like lakes and volcanoes. I am very glad you appreciated the last video and I will try to implement your suggestions in future projects. As always, I invite you to leave this video a like, to share it and to subscribe for more. I wish you a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci.